Hi, I'm Mark Honeybone from Property Ventures, and welcome to our weekly podcast where we interview prominent members of the investment community along with other professionals in the New Zealand property market. This is a free service from Property Ventures so that you can keep current and learn from some of the best around New Zealand. To check us out, take a look at propertyventures.co.nz. We hope you enjoy today's podcast. Hi and welcome back to another two-part podcast. We are very excited to have one of the most well-known and influential property commentators in New Zealand with us today, Olly Newland. He has had 7 books published, he appears in all facets of the media and the property circles and fights battles for us at times who are in this field of property investing. He has seen many property cycles come and go and seen more than most of us. He is still very active in the market, but now also helps others trying to get ahead through property. I'm sure you will enjoy part 1 of this interview. Good morning and welcome to the show, Olly.
Good morning, Mark. How are you?
Yeah, good. Now, many listeners will know of you and heard of some of your commentaries to the media over the recent years. I know many of them have read many of your books, and I know some have mentored. You have mentored them. In fact, I just spoke to an investor on Friday that you had mentored before. So some or many will know of you. Some won't know who you are at all. So to start off with, maybe you can spend some time talking about Olly Newland and sort of who you are and what you've come from.
Well, now that's
a very broad question.
That's going to take a while. I grew up in a family that wasn't in the slightest bit interested in property, so I don't know where this molecule came from. All I do remember is that I've pitied my father, my late father, at the time when I was a young boy, because he used to leave in the dark and come home in the dark, soaking wet often, working long hours. And I thought, I don't want to do this, because I think I just was very sorry for him. And so I was looking for a job, if you like, where I could pick my own hours. And I did a lot of work as a youngster, painting houses and mowing lawns and cleaning cars and so forth. And I loved the thought of being independent. I remember this just as a teenager. And I loved the thought of being independent. I also became a jazz drummer because I could read music, and I was earning more than my dear dad was by the time I was 16. And I went to university and all that sort of thing. So that feeling of entrepreneurship came to me very early. And at age 19, I bought a section at the back of Auckland. I had no idea why I bought it, didn't know what I was doing, but I bought it anyway. And I hadn't owned it for a few weeks when there was a knock on the door. This was before emails. And there was a Chinaman there, and he said he wanted to buy the section off me. And I paid £300, it was about a year's salary for it, and he offered me £600. And I couldn't add 3 and 3 together, and sold it, bang. And I remember walking down the street from my lawyers a week or two later with a cheque for £600, which is equivalent to 2 years' salary, at age 19, and realised this may be the way for me to have a job and not able to knock myself out from morning to night.
Right.
And that's how it started. I was ticked off by many people being a property speculator down there with car dealers and lawyers, and I said, I don't care, I've got £600.
Nice start.
It's a nice start. And by the time I was 21, I saw an advertisement in the Herald for a house for sale in New Zealand for £3,000 at 1% interest. And I thought this was a misprint, and I rang the owner up, and it wasn't a misprint. The guy was a member of the Social Credit Party, which was a defunct party that believed in no interest. So I thought, well, dope. And went out there and bought it with the money I'd made on the section. Paid £3,000, and he left the money at 1%. And 18 months later, virtually paid the place off. And I resold it again for £3,800. And I remember walking down the road with a cheque for nearly £4,000, which was equivalent to about 5 years' salary. And I thought, well, this is the game I'm going to stick to, and the rest is history.
Right. Oh, great stuff. So you were a speculator when you first started. I didn't really know you were into speculating too much these days.
Wash your mouth out.
So that as a young fellow, then what sort of progress from there? I mean, as you said, some listeners still really don't know who you are and where you've got to now, and obviously you've had many thousands of transactions since those early days.
Well, I mean, we're going back 60 years now.
Yes.
After that particular deal, I decided I'd do some more of these, but much more quickly. And I decided I didn't want to have tenants because the tenants at the time gave me grief, and I was only a young chap and couldn't handle it. So I bought places somehow and cleaned them up, added value, why not, and sold them for minute profits, and did nothing else. I didn't rent them out. Sometimes you had to rent them out because you didn't sell them, but that was a mistake. So I bought and sold for many years and paid tax, just ordinary tax, and this went cruising along from the 1960s to the 1970s. And things went haywire in the mid-70s. And when the Labor government got in and brought in a tax, speculation tax, does it sound familiar? And wanted to knock speculators out of the market because prices were rising. You could buy a whole house, fully equipped house on a full site for $10,000 or $15,000. Yes, that's right. And they'd risen to $20,000 and $25,000 for a whole house on a site in the middle of Auckland. And everybody was screaming the place down. Sounds familiar? And, they brought in this tax to stop these terrible speculators.
See? That's bad, isn't it? Gosh, terrible.
Oh, failures. Yeah, we were really shocked. So I came out the first time in public, which gave me a taste of publicity, and railed against it because I felt so offended. And I cornered them at the time by selling a house to a bunch of very poor people on the basis that if I sold it to them and it didn't attract the tax, they could stay there, and if I did attract the tax, I'd be thrown in the street. And the next thing I got was a telegram in those days from the Secretary of the Minister of Finance to come and see him. And we worked out a deal. I can't go into too much detail now.
Yeah.
The deal which allowed me to buy and sell and carry on, which I did. But it's top secret, I'm afraid. It's history.
Yeah, well, geez, it's we will talk about cycles afterwards, but I mean, geez, right back to then, that's in the 60s, it's not a hell of a lot of difference from now, isn't it? You know, people buy, add value, sell, and pay tax and all that.
Nothing has changed. I may get ahead of myself a fraction just to comment that nothing has changed in the market as far as buying, selling, human nature and greed and everything else, because the two drivers of the property market are fear and greed. Fear and greed, and nothing has changed. The only difference between then and now is the speed of communication. You can now communicate through emails or whatever, and text and so forth, and internet far faster than you could then. But nothing else has changed. Everything else is the same.
Right. Yeah. No. That's that. You're dead right. I mean, and it's the technology's been amazing. I mean, here we are, and you're having an interview. We can look at each other if we want to, but we're not in this case here for the podcast that we're doing. And we can talk to people overseas and what have you, and it just increases the speed phenomenally, and from stuff we wouldn't have dreamed of in the 70s, 80s, or even in the early 90s.
I remember driving around looking at properties and carrying with me a big bag of pennies. This is before 1967, penny coins. And you'd go to the nearest phone box and ring back at the office to see what calls there were, and then you'd turn the car around and go back to whatever it was going. So that's how you got around. A box full of pennies. It was a lumpy thing to do, I must admit.
Right. So for the media, you just seen sort of basically in the mid-70s, you probably was the first taste of the media, and it obviously sort of carried on. I didn't know who you were back in those days in the 80s even. Was that a regular sort of occurrence then? The media come to you to ask questions about property in Auckland?
Yeah, exactly. That started when I came up publicly to castigate the speculators' tax at the time. The media got very interested, and I got headlines. It was terrible for the first time. You've got no idea how nasty it is. And when you open a pathway to the media comes back to you, and all sorts of nasties come back, as we see in recent times. And I got quite nervous, but I stuck to it. There was television, of course, and there was radio and newspapers and whatever, just as now. So I got a lot of media attention, and I just stuck to it. And I guess I won. But you have to look back and realise that at the time it just was a very unpleasant period in time. But I got used to dealing with the media under a baptism of fire.
Right. And that would obviously put you in good stead then for being an author of your six books that you've put out so far?
6 or 7 years, well, thousands of articles. So the whole experience I had in the 70s, when all this nonsense was going on, I wrote my very first book called The Coming New Zealand Property Boom, which was absolute. It was the best thing I've ever written. I've never written anything better. And people still now come up to me and say they still keep it by their bed as to have a chuckle.
Yep.
And I just let rip, and without care. And in fact, I've lost my own copies. I had to go up and trade me to buy my copies back. But that was followed, I think from memory, that was 1978, followed in 1980 by the Property Boom, which was an upgrade version of that. And then I'm starting to get lost what I did then. There were several more books after that. The Rascal's Guide to Real Estate was a few years ago. The Day the Duck Bubble Bursts was another book a few years ago. Climbing the Property Ladder was another one. And then there was many articles and radio interviews and lectures and speeches and what have you over those decades. You never get used to it. Each one's like having a baby. It's always new and exciting.
Yep.
Just like this.
And as you said, the first one you had no fear with, and you just went for it. And sometimes that's when you can get your best writing out, I guess. And even though the media can hook into you, especially these days, if it doesn't go quite right.
Yeah, well, you've got to be very careful what you say sometimes. Yeah. Very careful. Everybody's so PC these days, it makes me throw up.
Yeah, no, I'm hearing you too. Okay, so move forward to 2014. What are you currently doing in the property market now? I know if you go to your website, you can see you do mentoring and what have you. What sort of Newlands do now?
Well, let's just back up. There's several questions involved there. Just bear in mind, without trying to sound dopey, at my age group now, my 70s, I can't now invest long term. There's no point. I can't take a 10 or 20 year view on anything anymore, which is a bit of a bummer. But there we go. So what I've done is over the last 5 years, I've consolidated. Just sidetracking, I saw the GFC, the global financial crisis, coming. I was on a cruise around the Mediterranean, and when we were in 2007 or 2006, met up with a banker from Hong Kong, and he said this is all going to turn to custard, get out of the market. And I had a lot of properties, commercial mainly, and I believed him because I had that same feeling. So I sold down, not 2006, 2007, and got myself tidy as I could, and only got a very slight haircut from the crash of these finance companies, because I had a lot of borrowings from finance companies, and I realised that they were going to be the first to go. Not being clever, because I sort of seen it before in the 80s. Yeah. And got myself as tidy as I possibly could, other than I think about $200,000 or $300,000 I got caught with, which wasn't too bad. I tied myself up for the current period, and now I have a portfolio of my own, which is just sitting there quietly and doing what it has to do. Now doing mentoring, as you mentioned, but a lot of analysis work, and I have a team of very nice people working with me. I've got a team of 7 or 8 people, and I became an authorised financial advisor, which is not an easy feat. Had a lot of exams, and we're now not only mentoring, but doing most of the work now is analysing people's portfolios properly, and with the property portfolio comes all their other finances as well. You can't just look at a property portfolio in isolation. What comes is all their other financial matters as well. So we have to sit down there, shares and investments of all sorts and family feuds and what have you, and we've got to sit here and be grief counsellors and remake stuff where we can. So it's very interesting, but I've got a team of experts with me, so I can't possibly know it all. And it's an extremely interesting job, I must say. And we're the only firm in the country that does it. Says, I'm showing off, I know, but we're not here saying, everything is free and you'll be a millionaire by Monday or anything, that sort of stuff. It's just prudent, careful analysis of people's situation. They want to get into the market, they want to get out of the market, they want to reorganise what they've got. We've got mortgage brokers, we've got the lot, and we get them tidy as we possibly can, or get them out of the mess they've got themselves into, which is the worst job.
Yep. Okay, that's great. I mean, you're using your expertise in the last decades and stuff to help others, and I love people that can do that, and they're doing it for the right reasons.
Yeah, the money is by the by. I get a huge buzz out of seeing somebody come in and their portfolio or their finances are a huge mess, and they don't know what to do next. And between me and the other people here to help me, we get it tidy, and it's a long job. Sometimes it takes a year or two to deal with them for a year or two, and sometimes it can be done in 5 minutes, but that's rare. Because people get a little frozen. They come in with, I've got a portfolio of investments and money or property, and they're not quite sure what the next step should be. It's always easier to see how to solve somebody else's problems. It's much harder to do your own.
Yeah, you did right. And we talk to investors often, and they're coming to me. Some have got a couple of properties, some are starting out, and the first thing as I ask is, what's your plan? Where are you heading? What do you want to achieve in the next 1, 5, 10 years and beyond? And some don't know, and it's pretty hard to get there if you don't know where you're heading.
Well, you've got to be very careful these days about giving advice to anybody. You've got to be an authorised financial advisor.
Exactly.
If you give advice to somebody on how they should put their money here or there or somewhere else, or sell something, and you're not authorised, it's straight to jail. Don't count. Don't pass go, and that's it. So there's a lot of people out there doing it, and I don't know how they get away with it.
Yeah, no, dead right, and that's where, as I said, there's a big few hurdles to jump to get to be a financial advisor, and so there should be to do that. So that's why I always ask that question: have you got a plan? Have you been to someone, or it's pretty hard to come to me and ask what sort of property you want.
Well, the problem is that Kiwis, and I guess I'm as bad as the rest of them, don't like sharing their problems with others, especially with professionals. They like to figure it out for themselves. They like to manage their own properties. They like to sort their own properties. They like to take no advice other than perhaps from a lawyer, and then they get jammed up. For instance, I think about 85% of properties in this country are managed by the owners. In Australia, for instance, it's exactly the opposite. About 85% of people hand their properties over to managers, and they think people think that by handing to a manager they're losing money, but actually it's the other way around, because we run a very big portfolio of management properties as well here, which is just another department, and we have to sometimes take owners by the hand and give them a slap to say to them that if this property's been empty for 3 months, you might as well cut the rent and fill it straight away.
Yep.
They don't get it. It's obvious. So being property managers is quite an insight into people's characters as well.
Yeah, I mean, people just, as you said, people make mistakes if they don't share. Ask for help, and I was no different when I started out. My investing didn't ask for help; you wanted to do it all yourself, and handing it over, having the experts have been there and done it before. Learn from other people's mistakes. That's my philosophy.
We all make mistakes. I'm good at making them myself. Don't worry.
Yeah, I made a few myself.
I have a philosophy that if you do 10 deals, you get 8 right, and you get 2 wrong. You're in the plus. Don't complain if you get 8 out of 10 right. You're going to make a couple wrong, and you just got to deal with it and just cut their throats and get rid of the deal and get on with it. Nobody gets 10 out of 10.
Yeah, no, good one. I like that. It's going by the renovations I did. We finished it a year ago, but the 2 years previous to that, I'd say that's pretty well right in the button.
Yeah, well, life is a matter of majorities. It is a matter of majorities. You just got to get the 8 out of 10, 7 out of 10 will even do. But don't try to get 10 out of 10 because you drive yourself crazy. Yeah,
and some people will in fact make the fault probably of buying nothing when they could have bought 10 properties and had 8 good ones, because the fear, as you said, fear and greed, and the fear of actually not having a property that does well sometimes might stop them getting a very good property.
Yeah, well, this happens a lot. I get clients in here who've sat on portfolios, have gone nowhere in the last 10 years. They bought them in the most way out places in the middle of nowhere, and they're staring at them for years at end, just sort of waiting for something to happen, and it's just not going to happen. And you just say, well, why are you sitting looking at them? You're just subsidising the tenants and giving yourself grief. But what it is people build up a portfolio of stuff, and it's become their pride and joy. It's their little kingdom, their little realm, and they feel sort of important to have this little kingdom of properties. And you've got to pop their bubble a bit and say, look, this is a load of rubbish. This stuff has got to go. Build another kingdom over there instead, and take down the map on the wall with all the pins in it, and get real.
Yes, absolutely. Okay, hey, we'll talk very soon about the property cycles, how it's changed. But first of all, and I think we've already answered this, how investing has changed over the decades. Your probably short answer is going to be very little by how we started off the show. Yeah, it has. It's the information that you can get so rapidly over the net and what have you is a big help. It allows you to look and analyse more properties in a given time. Before you used to have to wait weeks sometimes, if not even longer, to get information. And there was no such thing as leaky homes. Although this leaky home business, we can talk about that in another minute.
It's the basic game has stayed the same, and as I told you earlier, the greed and fear that drives the market. And houses, if that's what you're talking about, and commercial properties, another. I think that it's commercial properties are a little different. Houses are more or less the same. What drives them, because a lot of emotion driving residential property. And commercial properties changed a lot. That has changed a lot. People are much more savvy when it comes to commercial property, but that's a huge subject which we haven't.
Another day. Yep.
So carry on.
So the main difference now is just the communication, analysing deals. I mean, it's amazing. You can sit there and, as you do and I do, and many people listeners will be here. They can get a deal and analyse it in 20 minutes on the computer and have make a couple of phone calls, and they know, apart from being actually on site looking at the property with an inspector, can virtually do everything else.
You don't even have to go on site. You just go to Google Earth or Show My Street and walk around the property that way before you step out the door. But the one thing people make a mistake, it really irritates me. They bring huge spreadsheets to me and say, look, I've done a huge analysis on this property, and they've done every dollar that could possibly happen in and out of the place and come to a figure at the bottom. I say, look, this is all very nice, but it doesn't necessarily work that way. Analysis using strict numbers doesn't work. You haven't allowed for all sorts of things. Like properties, you've got to like them a bit. And other people have got to like them a bit. Some of them are pretty. A property can be pretty to look at, or it can be ugly to look at. That makes a hell of a difference to the value. You can't put that on a spreadsheet. And so spreadsheets and analysis are all very well, but at the end of the day, there's something in your gut that tells you this is a better deal than the other one, which may be next door and very similar, but this one's better. And that's something that comes with experience.
Yeah, absolutely. And you can't. That is the experience factor. I mean, you're probably like me. You can do your analysis on a bit of paper with about 4 figures in a matter of 30 seconds. With a pen and paper without even going on a computer. But as I said, the other factors you get from experience of actually knowing what works in that area. They said the look of the property, the colour, the little factors in the front that make it more appealing than others. That adds the value, and that's what it's all about. Having that add value or creating that add value with the property, whether you're keeping it or selling it, I guess.
Well, people often overlook simple things like there's a railway line at the back of the garden which doesn't add to the value. There's power lines over the top. There's the gang headquarters across the street. Those sort of things some people overlook can make a hell of a difference to the value of the place.
Yeah, absolutely. I see that every day, especially the pylon ones in Auckland.
And leaky, and of course the leaky thing.
Yeah, leaky. Do you want to talk about leaky homes?
Well, only so much as it's a disaster, I agree there. But of course, those of us in the business could tell straight away that when they started putting up these shonky cardboard boxes that there's going to be trouble. The leaky part wasn't quite clear, but we just knew that you can't put a rigid box on a concrete base and expect it not to fail, because just normal vibration, just a truck going by, let alone summer, winter earth movements, because this has all happened before. There's nothing new about leaky homes. Way back when I was a beginner, they started using fibrillite to build houses. And I don't mean just around the bottom. I mean whole houses out of fibrillite. You may know the material, which was a similar sort of flat sort of material. And these places cracked and let the water in. And banks then said these fibrillite houses, we will not lend on them because they crack and they're dangerous and they let water in and what have you. And the builders used to tell me always put let air in and let the water in and let the water out, and put in vents above and below and let plenty of air in and so forth. So we had a warning 50 years earlier.
Wow, still we
lost
did it.
Time. Got lost over time. But those of us in the game saw these little boxes going up, and I said, this is the old fibrillite story again. And sure enough, I didn't quite get the rotten boards and all that sort of thing, but we warned everybody at the time, don't touch this crap. But, people did.
Yeah, I've been amazed, and a couple of my builders in Auckland lately is places that have actually been built in the last 5 years, which shouldn't happen, like the leaky home syndrome, and they're just they've got these things passed through council, and they've still got these faults that shouldn't be passed off. So you have to be so careful still, even with places built in the last 5 years.
Well, people rely on the builder and the council to get it right, and the council and the builders blame the people and the architects. It's a round robin. But we've helped people here with leaky homes and helped them redevelop them and reclad them and whatever. One guy had built seven townhouses as an investment, every one of them leaky.
Right.
And So there was a couple of $1 million worth of work to be done there. So that was a different type of, that's not mentoring, that was a different type of analysis and overseeing a contract. And this is other things we do here is overseeing renovations, major renovations, not just the kitchen. But, there's big medical centres have been renovated, which we oversee. I mentioned those 7 upper townhouses that have to be done and so forth. So it's all sorts of jobs that are being done here.
I'd like to thank Ollie for his time today. It has been great, and I look forward to more next week, where he will talk more about the current cycle, where he sees opportunities and the market moving ahead. If you have any topics or anyone you'd like interviewed, please let us know. We hope you enjoyed, and we hope you have a fantastic day.